Hello everyone and welcome back to Rising Sign Astrology. In today's video, we're going to explore one of the more fascinating concepts in Vedic astrology, the Darakaraka. This is the planet in your chart that describes your spouse, your marriage, and the kind of partner that you're karmically drawn to. We'll break down what the Darakaraka is, how to identify it within your own chart, and most importantly, what it reveals about the qualities, the lessons, and the dynamics that you'll experience through your marriage and committed relationships. So think of the Darakaraka as, your mirror within a partnership, and it points to the type of person that you attract and the karmic bonds that you will share, and just, the growth that your soul is meant to experience in this lifetime through your spouse. And depending upon your chart and the planet which holds the lowest degree, it tells a pretty complete story about your love life, your long-term commitments, and just your marriage partner in this lifetime. So if you enjoy this type of content and want more deep dives into not only Western but Vedic astrology, please be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified whenever new videos go live. And if you found this video helpful or interesting, please do give it a thumbs up or drop a comment below. It really helps others discover the channel. And with that said, let's dive in. Okay, so the Darakaraka is one of the most straightforward yet powerful concepts in Vedic astrology. The word itself breaks down simply, right? Dara means spouse, and Karaka means significator or representation of. So Darakaraka is the planet that represents your spouse. And it's not about some mystical soul connection, right? It's literally describing the type of partner that you're drawn to and the dynamics that you will experience within that marriage. So in very practical terms, it shows who your spouse is, who stands beside you and walks with you in life, right? Who helps you through your day-to-day struggles, and really ultimately how the two of you work together as spouses. And you find your Darakaraka by looking at the planet in your chart with the lowest degree, right? That planet becomes the marker for your spouse. It's your marital bond. And the symbolism of that planet will color the role and the personality and even the karmic lessons that your partner will bring into your life. So the planet itself, and we'll get into what each of them signify, but it gives you this direct lens into who your partner is likely to be and what qualities they highlight in your life. Now, timing is also closely tied to the Darakaraka, right? Very often, the Mahadasha period of your Darakaraka planet signals the entry of your spouse or the beginning of a marriage. For example, if Jupiter is your Darakaraka, you may meet your spouse or marry during a Jupiter dasha. In the same way, if the seventh house of your Navamsa D9 chart is activated, it can also trigger marriage or bring your partner more prominently into your life at that time. So this makes the Darakaraka not only a symbolic indicator of spouse, but also something that can be looked at as a timing tool, right? And as always, the condition of the Darakaraka also matters, right? If it's joined by benefic planets such as Jupiter or Venus, right, the spouse's qualities can become more supportive or even softened. It could bring more harmony or growth through the marriage. But on the other hand, if the Darakaraka is influenced by malefic planets like Saturn or Rahu or Mars, it can add challenges or delays or just intensity to that partnership. And it doesn't necessarily mean a bad marriage. It's just how it gets colored, right? It just means that that particular union is going to carry unique karmic lessons and growth through those lessons that may come with more effort. Now, ultimately, the Darakaraka shows your soulmate in the truest sense, right? It's the person who walks through life with you, reflecting your own karmas back and helping you to work through them. It describes not just the qualities of your partner, but also the partnership itself, right? How these two souls interact, how they support one another, how they evolve together. And by understanding the Darakaraka, you can gain clarity on why your spouse shows up the way they do and why your marriage unfolds with whatever particular lessons it brings. And the idea of Darakaraka comes specifically from Gemini astrology, which is a branch of Vedic astrology. And since Vedic astrology uses the sidereal zodiac, that's the system you need to rely on. So in Western astrology, the tropical zodiac shifts the planetary degrees. So if you try to calculate the Darakaraka there, you can, end up with a very different planet, and that won't give an accurate result. So just be aware of that, because this technique is designed to work within the sidereal framework. Just an FYI before we jump in. Now we're going to move into a breakdown of the Darakaraka by planet. So this is where things really get interesting, because depending on which planet holds the lowest degree in your chart, your spouse will carry that planetary energy and flavor, and it'll show up in your life in very particular ways. And each planet tells a very different story, right? Sometimes it's about personality traits they embody or about the role they play in your growth, although it often reveals both. So let's go one by one, planet by planet, and see how each Darakaraka expresses itself through the spouse, and the way they impact your journey. So let's start with the sun. So when the sun is your Darakaraka, the spouse often embodies qualities of leadership and visibility and even authority. And you're likely attracted to someone who naturally commands respect, whether that's through their career, through social standing, or simply the way that they carry themselves. This is the spouse who wants to be seen and acknowledged, and in turn, you feel proud to stand beside them. There's often a strong connection to father here, right? This is the sun. Either your partner reminds you of your father or carries their traits, or, in some cases, your father can even play a role in bring that relationship into your life. Your marriage tends to center on themes of reputation and honor and building a life together that has not only stability but recognition, right? The sun. And because the sun represents power and individuality, a spouse connected to your Darakaraka can bring both light but also heat into your life, right? The sun burns. So there's someone that you can certainly lean on for protection and direction, but they may also have a tendency to dominate the relationship, especially if that solar energy is not balanced. And at times, their need to shine can actually overshadow your own sense of self, right? Requiring you to assert your own individuality so you don't get lost in their glow. And the lesson here, often revolves around learning how to share that stage together, right? Letting your partner be that dominant individual and admire their strength without letting it consume your own. And on the positive side, this placement gives a partner who is very ambitious and loyal and, determined to create a solid future. And they're likely very goal oriented and, probably hold an important position or enjoy a certain social status. And their drive and their masculine qualities, regardless of their actual gender, helps create a sense of protection and pride in your marriage. And while the sun is Darakaraka can sometimes bring intensity or clashes of ego, it can also promise a spouse who can really inspire you and motivate you and help you to step into much greater confidence in yourself through that bond that the two of you share. Okay, so if the moon is your Darakaraka, then you're drawn naturally to a spouse who provides comfort and care and emotional security, right? This is the partner who nurtures you above everything else, who is there to protect you and has a very instinctive awareness of your needs, even the ones that you try to keep hidden. And because the moon is connected to mother, your spouse may reflect motherly qualities, or, the influence of your own mother may play into how this relationship forms in some way, regardless of their gender. And you're attracted to a spouse that can make you feel safe and cared for, right? Someone who knows how to soothe your vulnerabilities and can create a real sense of peace in your personal life. And the moon as Darakaraka shows a spouse who's deeply emotional and very, very responsive, right? Just like the phases of the moon, your partner's moods would probably wax and wane often, right? And you would need to learn how to flow with them and probably their ever-changing emotional needs and landscape, right? It can create ups and downs in a marriage, but it also ensures that the relationship would never feel static, right? Your spouse is usually in tune with you. They're evolving and they're responding to any new emotional microclimates between the two of you. They're dialed in. And their presence can feel like a safety net, but at times you may feel overwhelmed by just how strongly they express their emotions. And because the moon is naturally linked to the fourth house of home and domestic comfort, this placement also shows a spouse who can really help create a very warm and supportive household, right? They may provide for you in very tangible ways, or you may benefit through property or home or family gains after marriage. And the moon also has a very sensual side. And with this placement, the spouse may have a very strong sex drive, right? Channeling that nurturing instinct into actual physical closeness and intimacy. They may be younger than you, or at least carry a very youthful energy, right? But they would always keep the relationship fresh and lively. And overall, moon as Darakaraka gives a partner who is very emotionally invested, right? They'd be very caring, they'd be very intuitive, and they'd have a very protective presence that would help you feel grounded but also supported. And while they would have, emotional ups and downs that can bring real intensity, they ultimately try to teach you the value of empathy and vulnerability and, ultimately building a home life that's rooted in real love. Okay, so if Mercury is your Darakaraka, then you are naturally drawn to a spouse who is going to feel like your best friend. Like, first and foremost, above everything else, they're your partner, they're your friend. And you want a partner that you can laugh with and talk to and share ideas with. And for the two of you, conversation is the lifeblood of the marriage, right? You need someone charming and witty and intelligent enough to keep you engaged. And with Mercury as Darakaraka, the spouse often carries a very youthful energy, right? Whether that shows up through their age, their playfulness, their personality, or simply, the ability to keep things light and fun, even when times are difficult. And this placement often brings a spouse who's very quick thinking and adaptable, right? They'd be very curious about life. They are likely to have very strong communication skills and a way with words, even a career tied to business or writing or speaking, even sales, right? There's a charming, almost childlike quality about them that just keeps the relationship fresh. And at times, this youthful energy can come across as maybe a little immature or restlessness. But it also keeps that bond that the two of you have very dynamic, and it makes things feel alive. So you wouldn't feel stagnant in this type of marriage, right? Your spouse would constantly push you to grow and to learn, and you enjoy exploring new ideas together. And because Mercury represents intellect and exchange, right, of ideas, of anything, the relationship with your spouse is likely to feel like just this ongoing dialogue, right? They would challenge your thinking, they'd make you laugh, they'd keep you on your toes. And more than anything, Mercury as Darakaraka creates a marriage that's rooted in friendship. Your spouse is not just your romantic partner, they're the person you want to talk to at the end of the day, right? The one that you can share not only serious discussions with, but also just fun, silly banter, which is very important. So for Mercury as Darakaraka, the foundation of that spousal companionship becomes a real glue that can keep the marriage strong far beyond, the infatuation and the physicality, and all those things start to fade in a marriage, because there's a real friendship at the root of it. Okay, if you have Venus as your Darakaraka, then love itself becomes the foundation of the marriage, right? You're not looking for a spouse because it's practical or convenient or financially beneficial, right? You want to marry for romance. Your partner would represent beauty and charm and connection. And you'd be drawn to someone who feels like a true love companion. So with Venus in this role of Darakaraka, attraction is going to be key. You want and need a spouse who is not only physically appealing, but also very refined in the way they carry themselves, right? Someone who has grace and charm and, even an eye for style. And your spouse would be very sociable, right? They'd help to pull you out of your shell and encourage you to enjoy life just more fully. And Venus as Darakaraka often points to a partner who enjoys good company and pleasant surroundings, and they enjoy the finer things in life. And they may have very, very expressive eyes and a very sensual presence, and just, they would naturally be in tune and care for how they look. And they would love clothes and luxury items, and they'd have very good taste, and all of that would play a real role in how they present themselves, not only to you, but the world. And being with them would naturally raise your own sense of social presence in the world and how you feel and your refinement. And in many cases, the spouse helps you live more beautifully and teaches you how to enjoy pleasure more without the guilt. And over time, Venus's Darakaraka also points to higher devotion and higher love, right? Later in life, the spouse may start to shift towards more spiritual practices or art, or even just a deeper devotion to God, right? Starting to channel that Venusian energy from not just the material, but to the divine. Now, if there are malefic planets with Venus on the shadow side, it can lead to, leaning too heavily into materialism or vanity or just superficial desires if that energy is not balanced. But the lesson in the marriage is to appreciate beauty and love while remembering that true partnership relies on and rests in loyalty, but also devotion. So with Venus as Darakaraka, the spouse is the one who teaches you what it means to love deeper, to love deeply, to enjoy life's pleasures, and to really balance like the enjoyment in the world with that higher spousal devotion. They're not just a partner in romance, they ultimately become the reason, that you learn to merge love and meaning into your life. Okay, if you have Mars as your Darakaraka, then you're going to naturally be drawn to a spouse who is very strong and assertive and just someone who's unafraid of life, someone who's unafraid of the challenges of life, right? And you want a partner who has courage and who is independent, someone who isn't afraid to take charge or push back when it's needed. And it often points to a spouse that has a real competitive streak, right? They embody that fiery Martian energy, someone who could be tied to careers like the military or the police, even athletics, even, fields like engineering or economics where it requires sharp, logical thinking, right? And you'd be excited by that. You would enjoy that energy and that drive and the fact that they won't shy away from confrontation. And your spouse is likely to be rather direct and straightforward, right? Sometimes even impatient. They would say what they mean. They would act quickly, often without hesitation. And this can make them very energizing and very inspiring, but it can also bring tension into the marriage if that nature turns more towards anger or impulsive behavior, right? Mars as Darakaraka means you may have to learn how to navigate conflict in new constructive ways, right? Your partner may really test your patience at times, and but at the same time, they would really teach you about courage and resiliency and how to stand firm in your own power. So it goes both ways. And from a physicality standpoint, your spouse would likely take very good care of themselves, right? They would value staying in good shape, as would you. And you would admire that in them. And they likely carry a very strong masculine energy, regardless of the gender, right? And that would bring a real sense of vitality to your life. Now, on the shadow side, if Mars is afflicted, the spouse may struggle with temper issues or making impulsive decisions or just like having an overly combative style of communication. Yet, even these challenges can carry lessons, right? Pushing you both to grow, not only in self-control, but also the ability to really fight for the things that truly matter. So overall, Mars as Darakaraka gives you a spouse who is independent and bold and just full of drive, right? They may not be the easiest person to be with at times, but that passion does keep the relationship alive and moving forward. And through them, you learn how to handle your own passions and how to handle your own conflicts, in ways that ultimately strengthen not only your bond, but also you personally. Okay, Jupiter as Darakaraka. So if you have this, then you're going to be drawn to a spouse who broadens your horizons and really helps you grow in wisdom, but through experience as well. This is the partner who will feel like a guide or a teacher in your life, right? They'd be as much as an advisor to you as they are a spouse, right? Someone who opens doors to new opportunities, new perspectives, new way of seeing the world. And oftentimes with Jupiter as Darakaraka, the spouse comes from a different cultural background, or a different religion, even a completely different part of the world. And being with them feels like an expansion of your own world because they introduce you to all of these new ideas, to new ways of thinking, right? To new experiences that you likely would not have sought out on your own. And you personally would be attracted to a spouse who is educated and wise and knowledgeable, right? With Jupiter as Darakaraka, you often want a partner who carries a real sense of faith and optimism, right? Someone who inspires you to aim higher and believe in your own potential. And this spouse, would likely be involved in teaching or advisory roles, even law or religion, any field that requires wisdom and good judgment. And they would be generous, not only in how they took care of you, but also with their resources, right? They would likely be successful. And, their presence in your life helps you feel more hopeful and supported as well, which then translates to you being able to pursue your own goals with more fervor and confidence. And at the same time, Jupiter as Darakaraka emphasizes shared growth, right? You and your spouse will experience life as this adventure together, whether that means traveling, learning, or, just building together side by side. And it's not uncommon for them to be very deeply spiritual or religious, right? And this could really infuse your marriage with a sense of higher meaning. And on the material side, Jupiter's influence points to a spouse who is very financially capable, right? They'd be good with investments, or at least blessed with opportunities that can bring real prosperity into the household. So overall, Jupiter as Darakaraka gives you a partner who acts both as, yes, a companion, but also a mentor, right? Someone that can support you and uplift you through those Jupiterian qualities of wisdom and optimism and generosity. So the marriage itself isn't just about stability and building. It really is about expansion and learning together and embracing this bigger vision for life together. Okay, if you have Saturn as your Darakaraka, then marriage is not something you would ever take lightly, right? For you, this is a very, very serious commitment. It's a bond that is built on responsibility and discipline. And you'd be drawn to a spouse who can provide real stability and security. Someone who can show up consistently and is really willing to shoulder the responsibilities of life with you. So this isn't about infatuation. This isn't about just romance or attraction. You desire and need and want a partner who will treat the marriage as this real lasting partnership. And Saturn as Darakaraka often points to a spouse who's reliable and mature and someone who's prepared to work very hard in order to build a strong foundation for the marriage and for the family. And it's not uncommon for the spouse to be older than you and carry this very serious disciplined energy, right? They could be tied to tradition and structure, and they'd value things like predictability over spontaneity, right? They'd be organized and responsible and dependable. They'd be a provider. And it would provide long-term safety within the marriage. At times, however, there could be a focus on duty that makes them feel cold or emotionally distant, like too reserved. And Saturn as Darakaraka often brings a partner who can internalize their emotions, right? And as a result, they would express their love more through actions or through the commitment rather than, verbal reassurance or over the top displays of affection. And because Saturn moves slowly, this placement can also, delay marriage. And you may need to wait for the right person to arrive. But when they do, you're likely to experience them in that bond as one that's deeply, deeply committed, even if it's not always glamorous or very emotionally expressive. On the darker side, if there are other influences with Saturn, the spouse may be overly cautious, or maybe they work too hard, or they just carry this weight of responsibility that feels heavy within the marriage. Yet, at the same time, it's what also makes them very trustworthy, right? You know that they're not going to abandon their duties when things get difficult. But ultimately, Saturn as Darakaraka gives you a spouse who embodies real maturity and patience and endurance in life, right? They likely won't be the most expressive partner, but they would be very solid and loyal, and they'd be devoted to building something real with you. Okay, so if Rahu is your Darakaraka, then your spouse often enters your life in rather unusual or unexpected or just unconventional ways. Rahu represents what is outside of the norm, right? So your partner may stand out as someone very different from you or your culture or your friend groups, your social circles, right? They may show up and be very different in terms of the expectation of what you always felt the spouse would be or should be. They could bring fame or status, a certain allure, but they would also carry an element of mystery. And sometimes Rahu as Darakaraka points to a spouse who could be initially unattainable, right? Whether they live far away, whether they're already in another relationship, or they're maybe surrounded by circumstances that makes the union seem very difficult at first or unattainable. And the spouse would have a very magnetic quality to them. They'd be very seductive, right? They tempt you into experiences that you may not have sought otherwise. And this can make the relationship very, very exciting, very transformational. But it would also make it complicated, especially if it pulls you into situations that start to test your ethics or your boundaries, right? Because with Rahu, appearances can be deceiving, right? Your spouse may project this image that isn't the full truth, or maybe they just reinvent themselves very often, leaving you to adjust as the marriage continues to evolve. They may be considered an outsider or a very free thinker, just someone with very unconventional ideas. But that uniqueness becomes part of what draws you to them, right? Now, on a technical note, when Rahu is the Darakaraka, you need to adjust the degree because the nodes move backwards through the zodiac. So instead of taking the degree directly, you should subtract the planet's degree from 30 degrees to find its true placement as Darakaraka. So, for example, if Rahu is at 28 degrees, you should subtract it from 30, giving 2 degrees, right, which may make it the lowest degree in the chart. But overall, Rahu as Darakaraka gives you a spouse who would be anything but ordinary, right? They would bring a lot of allure and intensity and, growth, but it would come through unconventional ways, breaking traditions, right? you'd be pulled to step outside of what is comfortable. And the marriage can feel very fated and very transformational, but it could also challenge you to discern between what is illusion and what is truth, right? But through them, you would learn real lessons about desire and, just sort of, navigating the unexpected with a spouse. Okay, well, thank you for sticking with me through this breakdown. That wraps our look at the Darakaraka, right? The planet with the lowest degree in your chart that represents your spouse and the karmic lessons that you'll experience through the marriage. So understanding this hopefully gives you a little bit of a window into the kind of partner that you're drawn to, the qualities they'll bring into your life, and ultimately the deeper purpose behind the union. If you'd ever like to see exactly what your Darakaraka is and how it shows up in your chart, you can always book a personal reading with me at risingsignastrology.com. And if this video was helpful or even just got you thinking a little bit about your relationships in a new way, please give it a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and makes sure other fans and lovers of astrology can find the content. And let me know in the comments which planet is your Darakaraka and whether you've seen it reflected in your spouse or your relationships. I do think the stories add a level of richness to the discussion and help others recognize these same themes in their own lives. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.